Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the USS Horizon, watching the stars through the main viewing screen. His ship was traveling with 5 other vessels through the outer edge of known space. Each ship belonged to a different species, from the Galactic Council. The humans were the newest members of this group, and many of the older species still looked down on them. The bridge was quiet except for the soft hum of the ship's engines. Dr. Lisa Hamilton sat at her science station, studying data from nearby star systems. Commander Rick Torres was at his tactical post keeping watch for any signs of danger. Engineer Amy Foster was checking the ship's systems from her engineering console. "Captain," called out Lieutenant Ben Carter from the communication station, "I'm picking up something strange on the long-range sensors." Jake walked over to Ben's station. "What kind of something?" "It looks like a distress signal, sir. Very weak and breaking up. The computer can barely make sense of it." Lisa looked up from her station. "Where's it coming from?" Ben checked his readings again. "About 2 days' travel from here in an uncharted system. The signal is definitely artificial, not natural." Jake frowned as he studied the data. The signal was indeed very weak, like it was coming from a small ship with failing power systems. Someone was in trouble out there. "Send the signal data to the other ships in our fleet," Jake ordered. "Let's see what they think." Ben nodded and transmitted the information to the 5 alien vessels traveling with them. Within minutes, responses started coming back on the main screen. The first reply came from Captain Vorth Ka of the Zalanti Empire ship Golden Blade. The Zalanti were a proud species who considered themselves the most civilized in the galaxy. Vorth Ka's image appeared on screen, his blue skin gleaming and his forearms crossed in dismissal. "Captain Morrison," Vorth Ka said in his deep voice, "the Zalanti Empire does not concern itself with such weak signals. Whoever sent this distress call is clearly not important enough to warrant our attention. We suggest you ignore it as well." The second response came from the Korath collective vessel data stream. The Korath were highly advanced beings who made most decisions using complex computer calculations. Their ship's AI spoke for them in a mechanical voice. Analysis complete. The probability of a successful rescue mission is only 12%. The energy cost versus potential benefit ratio is negative. The Korath Collective recommends abandoning this course of action. Logic dictates we continue our planned route. The third and final response came from Commander Thexvor of the Vex Coalition warship Iron Fist. The Vex were a military species who respected only strength and power. Thexvor's scarred face filled the screen as he spoke with obvious contempt. "The Vex do not waste time or resources on the weak," he growled. "If whoever sent that signal cannot survive on their own, they deserve whatever fate awaits them. Only the strong deserve to live in this galaxy." Jake felt his jaw tighten as he listened to these responses. He looked around his bridge at his crew. All of them wore expressions of disgust at what they had just heard. "Sir," Amy said quietly, "that signal could be coming from a family with children or injured people who can't help themselves." "The other species don't seem to care," Rick added, shaking his head. Jake stared at the weak distress signal data on his screen. Someone out there was calling for help, and every other species in their fleet was willing to just ignore them. It didn't matter to them if it was a family, children, or anyone else in need. His communication system buzzed. It was Admiral Patricia Stone from Galactic Command back on Earth. "Captain Morrison." The Admiral's stern face appeared on a smaller screen. "I've been monitoring the communications between your fleet. The other species have made their position clear about this distress signal. I'm ordering you to stay with the main fleet and continue the mission as planned." Jake looked at the weak signal again, then at his crew. Every human face on the bridge showed the same thing he was feeling. They couldn't just leave someone to die out there. "Admiral," Jake said slowly, "with respect, someone is calling for help." "The other council species have already decided it's not worth the risk or resources," Admiral Stone replied. "As the newest members of the Galactic Council, we can't afford to anger our allies by going against their judgment. But Admiral..." "That's an order, Captain. Stay with the fleet." The communication ended, leaving Jake staring at a blank screen. Around him, his bridge crew waited quietly. They all knew what the right thing to do was. They also knew what their orders were. Jake thought about his daughter back on Earth. What would he tell her if she asked him what he did when someone called for help? Could he look her in the eye and say he ignored them because other species told him to? He thought about why humans had joined the Galactic Council in the first place. It wasn't to become like the other species. It was to bring something different to the galaxy. "Ben," Jake said finally, his voice steady and clear. "Yes, sir. Plot a course for that distress signal." The bridge went silent. Everyone knew what this meant. Jake was disobeying direct orders from Galactic Command and going against the wishes of their alien allies. "Sir," Rick said carefully, "are you sure about this?" Jake turned to face his crew. "When I became a starship captain, I swore an oath. Part of that oath was to help those in need, regardless of species or circumstance. I'm not going to break that oath because other species think helping people is a waste of time." Lisa smiled from her station. "The crew is with you, Captain." Amy nodded agreement. "We didn't come out here to become like them. We came to be ourselves." Jake felt pride swell in his chest as he looked at his crew. This was what made humans different. This was what they brought to the galaxy. "Ben, send a message to the other ships. Tell them the USS Horizon is breaking formation to investigate the distress signal." "What should I tell them when they ask why?" Ben asked. Jake smiled grimly. "Tell them it's because we're human." The USS Horizon changed course and headed toward the unknown system where someone was calling for help. Behind them, the other 5 ships continued on their planned route, leaving the humans to face whatever dangers waited alone. As they traveled toward the distress signal, Jake wondered what they would find. He didn't know if they could help whoever was out there. He didn't know if his decision would cost him his career or put his crew in danger. But he knew one thing for certain. When someone called for help, humans answered. That's what made them who they were. And no alien species was going to change that. The USS Horizon moved carefully through the asteroid field that surrounded the unknown star system. Rocks the size of buildings floated past the ship's hull, some close enough to scrape the paint. Captain Jake Morrison stood behind Amy Foster as she piloted the ship through the dangerous space. "This is why no one wanted to come here," Amy muttered, steering around a particularly large asteroid. "One wrong move and we become space dust." "How much further to the signal?" Jake asked. "Lieutenant." Ben Carter checked his instruments. "About 6 hours at this speed, Captain. The signal is definitely getting stronger as we get closer." Dr. Lisa Hamilton looked up from her science station with concern on her face. "I'm reading dangerous radiation levels ahead. Whatever ship is sending that distress call is in a very bad location." Commander Rick Torres shook his head. "No wonder the other species didn't want to risk coming here. This whole system is a death trap." Jake watched the asteroids drift past on the main screen. 2 days had passed since they left the fleet, and every hour brought new challenges. Solar storms had damaged their communication array. Magnetic fields from the system's strange star played havoc with their navigation systems. Several times they had barely avoided collision with space debris, but the distress signal kept getting stronger. Someone was definitely out there, and they were still alive. "Captain," Ben called out suddenly, "I'm getting a clearer reading on the signal now. It's coming from a small ship, maybe a quarter of our size. The power signature suggests their main systems are failing." Lisa ran the new data through her computers. "Based on the ship's design, I think it might be Kythera." Jake frowned. He knew about the Kythera from his briefings. They were a peaceful species known for their beautiful art and music. They had no military and rarely left their home system. What would Kythera be doing way out here? "Aren't the Kythera having some kind of civil war?" Rick asked. Lisa nodded grimly. "Last report said their homeworld was being torn apart by fighting. The peaceful majority was being attacked by a militant group that wanted to join the Galactic Military Alliance." "Refugees," Jake said quietly. "They're refugees running from the war." Amy successfully guided the ship through the last section of the asteroid field. Ahead of them, empty space opened up around a small dying star, and there, drifting helplessly near the star's radiation field, was a tiny ship that looked ready to fall apart. "There she is," Ben announced. That's definitely where the distress signal is coming from. Jake stared at the small vessel on the screen. It was clearly a civilian ship, not built for long journeys or dangerous space. Parts of its hull were missing. One of its engine pods was completely gone. Atmosphere was leaking from several holes in its side. How is anyone still alive? On that thing? Amy wondered aloud. Lisa was already scanning the ship with her instruments. I'm reading 4 life signs. They're very weak, but they're alive. 2 adults and 2 children, I think. Jake felt his heart sink. A family with children, barely surviving, in a ship that was falling apart. How long had they been out here? How many ships had passed them by? Can we get close enough for a rescue? He asked Amy. Amy studied the readings from the dying ship and the dangerous radiation around it. It's going to be risky, Captain. That star is throwing off a lot of harmful energy. We can only stay close for a short time before it starts damaging our systems. How short? Maybe 30 minutes before we have to pull back. Jake turned to his crew. That's not much time for a rescue operation. Are we sure we can do this? Rick stepped forward. Captain, we didn't come this far to turn back now. Those people need help. Lisa was already gathering her medical supplies. If they're Kythera, they'll need special medical care. Their biology is different from ours. I'll need to modify some of our equipment. Amy was calculating approach vectors. I can get us close, but we'll need to work fast. That radiation will cook us if we stay too long. Jake looked at each member of his crew. They were scared. He could see that. This was dangerous, and they all knew it, but not one of them suggested leaving. All right, people, let's go save some lives. The next 20 minutes were the most tense of Jake's career. Amy slowly moved the USS Horizon closer to the dying ship, while radiation alarms started going off. The closer they got, the clearer the picture became of just how bad things were for the people inside. Captain, Lisa said, her voice tight with emotion. I'm getting more detailed scans now. The adults appear to be severely injured. The children are suffering from malnutrition and exposure to toxic gases. Their life support system has been failing. For weeks. Jake clenched his fists. These people had been dying slowly while ship after ship ignored their calls for help. Ben, can you establish communication with them? Ben worked at his station for several minutes. I'm trying, sir, but their communication system is barely working. Wait, I'm getting something. A weak, crackling voice came through the speakers. The words were in the Kythera language, which the ship's computer tried to translate. Please. Help, children dying, been calling. So long. Please. The voice was that of an adult Kythera, probably one of the parents. Jake could hear the desperation and exhaustion in their tone, even through the poor translation. Tell them we're here to help, Jake ordered. Tell them we're going to get them out of there. Ben transmitted the message. A few moments later, the reply came back. Even through the static and poor translation, the relief and gratitude in the voice was clear. Thank you. Thought no one would come. Other ships? They all left us. Jake felt anger burn in his chest. Other ships had seen these people and left them to die. How many vessels had passed by this family while they slowly ran out of air and food? Captain, Amy called out urgently. Radiation levels are getting dangerous. We need to start the rescue, now or pull back. Jake made his decision. Rick, take a team over there and get those people out. Lisa, go with him and be ready to treat them the moment they're aboard. What about the radiation? Rick asked. We'll deal with it. Those people have been waiting too long already. Rick nodded and headed for the airlock with 2 other crew members. Lisa gathered her medical equipment and followed. Jake watched on the screen as their small shuttle launched toward the dying ship. Amy, how much time do we have? Amy checked her instruments, her face pale. Maybe 10 more minutes before we start taking serious damage. On the screen, Jake could see Rick's shuttle docking with the refugee ship. Every second felt like an hour as he waited for word from the rescue team. Finally, Rick's voice came through. The communicator. Captain, we've got them. 4 Kythera, just like Lisa said, 2 adults and 2 children. They're in bad shape, but they're alive. Get back here now, Jake ordered. He watched the shuttle return while radiation warnings flashed red all around the bridge. The moment the shuttle was secure, Amy pulled the USS Horizon away from the dangerous star. As they reached safer distance, Jake felt relief wash over him. They had done it. They had saved 4 lives that everyone else had abandoned. "Captain," Lisa's voice came from the medical bay. "You need to see this." Jake hurried to the medical section of the ship. There, lying on 4 medical beds, were the Kithra family they had rescued. The adults were unconscious, their breathing shallow. The 2 children were awake but very weak. The Kithra looked similar to humans, but with pale blue skin and large, gentle eyes. Even in their weakened state, Jake could see the intelligence and kindness in their faces. "How are they?" he asked Lisa. "They'll live," she said, but her expression was grim. "Just barely. A few more days and we would have been too late. They've been surviving on emergency rations and recycled air for months." Jake looked at the small family. The youngest child, barely more than a baby, reached out with a tiny hand. Without thinking, Jake took the small hand in his own. The child looked up at him with large, trusting eyes and made a soft sound that the translator rendered as safe. Jake felt tears in his eyes. This was why they had come. This was why humans were different from the other species in the galaxy. When someone needed help, they answered the call. Dr. Lisa Hamilton worked without stopping for 18 hours straight. The medical bay of the USS Horizon had become her entire world as she fought to save the 4 Kithara refugees. The 2 adults, who she learned were named Zephnal and Mirasol, were in critical condition. Their children, little Pipka and baby Nevlin, were weak but stable. Captain Jake Morrison checked on Lisa every few hours. Each time he found her bent over her patients, adjusting medical equipment that was never designed for alien biology. "How are they doing?" Jake asked during one of his visits. Lisa wiped sweat from her forehead. "It's complicated. Kithara biology is similar to human, but different enough to make treatment difficult. Their blood chemistry is completely different. The medicines that work for us could kill them. What do you need?" "Time and information. I'm having to figure out their medical needs through trial and error. It's like being a doctor for the first time all over again." Jake looked at the small family lying on the medical beds. The children were so young and innocent. How could anyone just leave them to die in space? "Lisa, there's something else. We're getting pressure from Galactic Command." Lisa looked up from her medical scanner. "What kind of pressure?" "Admiral Stone has been sending messages every few hours. The other species in our fleet reported us for disobeying orders. They want us to rejoin the expedition immediately. What about our patients?" Jake's jaw tightened. "Command wants us to drop them off at the nearest space station and continue our mission." Lisa stared at him in shock. "Jake, they'll die. No space station. Out here has the medical facilities to treat them. And even if they did, most stations won't take refugees." "I know. These people have been through hell. They've been running from a war, living in a dying ship for months, watching their children slowly starve. And now, Command wants us to abandon them again?" Jake put a hand on Lisa's shoulder. "I'm not abandoning anyone. We're going to see this through." Just then, Engineer Amy Foster's voice came through the communicator. "Captain, we have a problem. You need to get to engineering right now." Jake hurried through the ship's corridors to the engineering section. He found Amy standing in front of a bank of flashing red warning lights. "What's the situation?" Jake asked. "The Kithara family needs special atmospheric conditions to survive," Amy explained. "Their lungs can't process our standard air mixture for very long. I've been modifying our life support systems to create a safe environment for them." "That sounds like good news." Amy shook her head. "The modifications are putting a huge strain on our power systems. We're using 60% more energy than normal just to keep them alive. At this rate, we'll drain our reserves before we reach the nearest inhabited system." Jake studied the engineering readouts. The numbers were clear. They couldn't maintain life support for the Kithara family and make it back to civilization with their current power levels. "Options?" he asked. "We can reduce power to non-essential systems, cut heating in crew quarters, reduce lighting, shut down recreational facilities. It'll be uncomfortable, but we can make it work." "Do it." Amy nodded and began shutting down systems throughout the ship. Within an hour, the USS Horizon became a much colder and darker place. The crew wore extra layers of clothing and carried portable lights, but the Kythera family continued to receive the life support they needed. Commander Rick Torres found Jake in his ready room later that evening. "Captain, the crew wants you to know they support your decision completely. No one is complaining about the cold or the darkness." Jake looked up from his reports. "What about the pressure from command?" Rick's expression grew serious. "Admiral Stone sent another message. She's threatening court-martial proceedings if we don't report to the nearest starbase immediately." "And the other species in our fleet?" "They're furious." Captain Vorth Ka sent a formal complaint about human unreliability. "The Korath AI calculated that our actions prove humans make decisions based on emotion rather than logic." Commander Thex Vor said we're too weak to be useful allies. Jake felt tired. The weight of command had never felt heavier. He was risking his career, his crew's future, and their relationship with alien allies. All for 4 refugees that the rest of the galaxy had written off as worthless. "Do you think I made the right choice, Rick?" Rick sat down across from Jake's desk. "Captain, I've served with you for 3 years. I've never seen you make a decision you didn't believe was right. And I've never seen the crew more united behind you than they are now, even with all the risks, especially because of the risks. Anyone can do the easy thing when it doesn't cost them anything. It takes real courage to do what's right when it might cost you everything." Jake's communication system buzzed. It was another message from Admiral Stone. He almost ignored it, but duty required him to listen. Admiral Stone's stern face appeared on the screen. Behind her, Jake could see the flags of Earth and the Galactic Council. "Captain Morrison, this is your final warning. You are to proceed immediately to Starbase Delta 7 and transfer your alien passengers to station medical facilities. Failure to comply will result in immediate court-martial proceedings." Jake looked at the message for a long moment, then activated his reply. "Admiral Stone, this is Captain Morrison. I understand your orders, but I cannot in good conscience abandon these people. They trusted us to help them, and we're going to see this through to the end. Morrison out." He ended the transmission without waiting for a reply. 2 days later, Amy Foster was working in the engine room when she noticed something strange in the ship's power readings. "Captain to engineering," she called over the communicator. Jake arrived within minutes. "What is it, Amy?" Amy pointed to her display screen. "Remember how I said we were using too much power to keep the Kythera alive? Well, look at this." Jake studied the numbers. Their power consumption had actually decreased over the past day. "How is that possible?" Amy smiled. "I think our passengers are adapting. Dr. Hamilton says Kythera biology is incredibly flexible. They're slowly adjusting to our atmosphere. In another few days, they might not need the special life support modifications at all." Jake felt hope for the first time in days. "You mean we might actually make it?" "More than that, Captain. If they keep adapting at this rate, we'll have power to spare by the time we reach civilized space." Jake's communicator buzzed. It was Dr. Hamilton calling from the medical bay. "Jake, you need to come here right away. Something wonderful has happened." Jake hurried to the medical bay, where he found an amazing sight. Zephnal, one of the adult Kythera, was sitting up in bed. His large eyes were clear and alert for the first time since the rescue. "Captain," Lisa said with excitement in her voice, "he's been asking to speak with you. The translator is working much better now that he's stronger." Jake approached the bed carefully. Zephnal looked at him with those gentle, intelligent eyes and spoke in his soft, musical voice. "You are the human captain who saved us." The translator rendered his words. "Yes, how are you feeling?" "Better. Much better. My mate Mirasol is also improving. The children grow stronger each day." Zephnal paused as if gathering his thoughts. "Captain, I must ask you something important." "What is it?" "Why did you come for us? We sent distress calls to many ships. All ignored us. The proud Zelanti, the logical Korath, the strong Vex. All left us to die. Why are humans different?" Jake thought about the question. It was something he had been asking himself for days. Because leaving people to die is wrong, he said simply. It doesn't matter what species you are or what others think of you. If someone needs help and we can provide it, we help. Zephnal's eyes filled with what looked like tears. The other species in the galaxy judge worth by strength or intelligence or usefulness. But humans judge worth by something else. What's that? By the simple fact that we exist, that we are alive and feel pain and love our children. Zephnal reached out with a weak hand. Thank you, Captain Morrison. You have given us more than life. You have given us hope that goodness still exists in the galaxy. Jake took the alien's hand in his own. At that moment, he knew that no matter what happened with Command or the other species, he had made the right choice. Outside the medical bay, the USS Horizon continued its journey through space, carrying its precious cargo toward safety. The USS Horizon had been traveling for 2 weeks since the rescue when something beautiful happened. Captain Jake Morrison was walking through the ship's corridors when he heard music coming from the recreation room. It wasn't human music. The IE sounds were like nothing he had ever heard before. Jake followed the melody and found little Pipka sitting at one of the computer terminals. The young Kythera girl was moving her hands over the control panel, but instead of working with data, she was creating music. The ship's computer systems were responding to her touch, turning maintenance alerts and system reports into flowing, beautiful songs. That's incredible, Jake whispered to engineer Amy Foster, who was watching from the doorway. Amy nodded, her eyes wide with wonder. She's been doing this for hours. Somehow she can make our boring computer sounds into art. I've never seen anything like it. Dr. Lisa Hamilton joined them in the doorway. Kythera children learned to find beauty in everything around them. Even in the middle of their civil war, they were still creating art and music. Jake watched as Pipka continued to work her magic on the computer systems. The sounds she created were so beautiful that other crew members had started gathering to listen. For the first time since the rescue began, people were smiling and relaxing. Captain, Pipka said in her small voice, noticing him in the doorway. The ship's translator was working perfectly now that the family had recovered. Hello, Pipka. Your music is wonderful. The little girl beamed with pride. Mama says that every sound in the universe wants to be part of a song. You just have to listen carefully to hear what it wants to say. Jake knelt down to her level. What do our ship's computers want to say? Pipka tilted her head thoughtfully. They want to say thank you. They're happy to be helping people instead of just running by themselves. Jake felt a warmth in his chest. This child had found beauty and meaning in their rescue mission that he hadn't even considered. Over the following days, the relationship between the human crew and the Kythera family grew stronger. Mirasol, Pipka's mother, had recovered enough to move around the ship. She spent hours in the kitchen area with the ship's cook, learning to prepare foods that would be healthy for both humans and Kythera. The key is finding the harmony between different needs, Mirasol explained to Jake during one of his visits to the kitchen. Humans and Kythera have different bodies, but we both need nourishment and care. Jake watched as she combined human ingredients with Kythera spices that Amy had managed to synthesize from their medical data. The result was food that satisfied both species and somehow tasted better than either could make alone. Zephnal, Pipka's father, spent most of his time in the ship's library, learning about human culture and history. When Jake found him there, one day the Kythera man was reading accounts of Earth's wars and conflicts. This is very interesting, Captain, Zephnal said, looking up from a history book. Humans have fought many wars, just like my people did. Yes, we have a violent history, Jake admitted, feeling somewhat ashamed. But you also have something my people lost sight of during our civil war. What's that? Zephnal pointed to another section of the book. You never stopped believing that peace was possible. Even in your darkest wars, there were always humans working for peace, helping enemies, protecting the innocent. My people forgot this. We let the violent ones take control because we thought strength was more important than compassion. Jake thought about this conversation for hours afterward. He had never considered that humanity's history of conflict might actually show their strength rather than their weakness. Commander Rick Torres had his own growing relationship with the family. The military officer had initially been skeptical about the rescue mission, but spending time with the Kithara had changed his perspective completely. "Captain," Rick said during one of their daily briefings, "I need to tell you something. I was wrong about this mission." "What do you mean?" "When we first picked up that distress signal, I thought helping them was a nice gesture, but ultimately not important for galactic security. I thought the other species were probably right about focusing on bigger strategic concerns." Jake waited for him to continue. "But after spending time with this family, I realize I was thinking about it all wrong. The galaxy isn't made up of big strategic concerns. It's made up of individual people with families and dreams and fears. If we can't protect individuals, all our grand strategies are meaningless." Jake nodded. "The crew seems to feel the same way." "They do. Morale has never been higher. Everyone feels like we're doing something that really matters. But not everything about the journey home was peaceful. 3 weeks after the rescue, they encountered another Galactic Council patrol. The alien ships demanded that the USS Horizon stop for inspection. Jake stood on the bridge as Captain Vorthka of the Zelanti ship appeared on the main screen. "Captain Morrison," Vorthka said with obvious disdain, "you are in violation of multiple Galactic Council regulations. You will transfer your alien passengers to our ship immediately." "I'm afraid I can't do that," Jake replied calmly. "Cannot or will not?" "Will not. These people are under the protection of the United Earth Space Force." Vorthka's blue face darkened. With anger, "The Kethra are a weak and useless species. They contribute nothing to galactic civilization. You humans are fools to waste resources on them." Before Jake could respond, Pipka's voice came through the ship's communication system. She had somehow connected to the transmission from the computer terminal where she worked on her music. "We may be weak," the little girl said, her voice clear and strong, "but we know how to make beautiful things. We know how to find joy even when everything is sad. Isn't that worth something?" The bridge of the USS Horizon fell silent. Even Captain Vorthka seemed taken aback by the child's words. "Beauty and joy are luxuries," Vorthka finally said, but his voice lacked its earlier conviction. "No," Pipka replied. "Beauty and joy are what make life worth living. Without them, what's the point of being strong or smart or powerful?" The transmission ended, leaving the bridge quiet. Jake looked around at his crew and saw the same expression on every face that he felt in his own heart. Pride. Later that day, Dr. Hamilton made an important discovery while reviewing the family's medical records. "Jake, you need to see this." She called him to the medical bay urgently. "What is it?" Lisa pulled up a complex genetic analysis on her computer screen. "I've been studying the family's DNA patterns as part of their medical treatment. Look at this." Jake studied the data, but it meant nothing to him. "I don't understand what I'm looking at." This family isn't just any group of Kithara refugees. They're carriers of something incredibly valuable. Their genetic patterns contain the complete cultural memory of their species. What does that mean? It means they carry the genetic encoding of Kithara art, music, literature, and philosophy going back thousands of years. They're not just refugees, Jake. They're living libraries of their entire civilization. Jake felt his breath catch. "Are you saying—" "I'm saying this family contains the accumulated knowledge and culture of their entire species. If they had died in that ship, all of Kithara civilization would have died with them." Jake looked through the medical bay window at the family. Pipka was playing with baby Nevlin while their parents watched with gentle smiles. They looked like any normal family, but they were carrying the soul of their entire species. "The other council species," Jake said slowly. "They almost let an entire civilization disappear forever. Because they judged them as weak and useless," Lisa added. "They never bothered to learn what the Kithara actually were." Jake felt a deep sense of satisfaction. His crew had not just saved 4 lives. They had saved an entire culture, an entire way of seeing the universe, all because they believed that every life had value, regardless of what anyone else thought. As the USS Horizon continued its journey toward civilized space, Jake knew that whatever consequences awaited them, they had done something truly important. They had shown the galaxy that humanity brought something different to the stars, something the galaxy desperately needed. The courtroom on Starbase Alpha was packed with representatives from dozens of different species. Captain Jake Morrison sat at the defendant's table, wearing his dress uniform. Beside him sat his lawyer, a stern woman from Earth who specialized in military law. Across the room, the prosecution table was filled with officials from the Galactic Council. Jake looked over his shoulder and saw his crew sitting in the gallery. Dr. Lisa Hamilton, Commander Rick Torres, Engineer Amy Foster, and Lieutenant Ben Carter had all insisted on attending the court-martial. Behind them, he was surprised to see the Kythera family. Zephnal and Mirasol sat with their children, all of them looking nervous but determined. The judge was a Korath, one of the logical, computer-like species that made decisions based purely on facts and calculations. Judge Tech 9 called the courtroom to order with its mechanical voice. Captain Morrison, you are charged with disobeying direct orders, endangering your crew, and misusing Galactic Council resources. How do you plead? Jake stood up straight. Not guilty, Your Honor. The prosecutor was a Zelanti officer named Vex Tal. He stood up with all four of his arms crossed, his blue skin gleaming under the courtroom lights. Your Honor, the facts are simple. Captain Morrison received direct orders to ignore a distress signal and continue with his mission. Instead, he broke formation, endangered his crew in a dangerous rescue operation, and wasted valuable time and resources on a group of worthless refugees. Jake felt anger rise in his chest at the word worthless, but he stayed silent. Vex Tal continued his opening statement. The defendant claims he was following his conscience, but military officers must follow orders, not personal feelings. If every captain decided to ignore commands whenever they felt like it, the Galactic Council would fall apart. The prosecutor called several witnesses to testify against Jake. Captain Vorth Ka of the Zelanti ship explained how Jake had ignored the wisdom of more experienced species. The Korath AI calculated the exact cost of the rescue mission and concluded it was economically wasteful. Commander Thex Vor of the Vex Coalition testified that Jake's actions showed humans were too emotional to be trusted with important military decisions. When it came time for Jake's defense, his lawyer called Dr. Hamilton to the witness stand. Dr. Hamilton, please tell the court what you discovered about the Kythera family during their medical treatment. Lisa stood up confidently. Your Honor, during my examination of the family, I discovered that they carry the complete genetic memory of Kythera civilization. Their DNA contains thousands of years of art, music, literature, and philosophy. A murmur went through the courtroom. Judge Tech 9 processed this information with its computer-like mind. Are you saying these refugees have significant cultural value? The judge asked. More than that, Your Honor. They are the living repository of their entire species' knowledge. When their homeworld was destroyed in the Civil War, most Kythera cultural centers were lost. This family represents the last connection to their civilization's greatest achievements. Jake's lawyer pressed the point. What would have happened if Captain Morrison had followed orders and left them to die? An entire civilization's worth of knowledge and beauty would have been lost forever. Thousands of years of cultural evolution, gone without a trace. The prosecutor objected. Your Honor, this information was unknown at the time. Captain Morrison couldn't have known about their genetic importance when he made his decision. Jake's lawyer smiled. That's exactly the point. Captain Morrison saved them not because they were valuable, but because they were people in need. The fact that they turned out to be culturally priceless only proves that we can't judge the worth of individuals based on first impressions. Then came the moment everyone was waiting for. Jake's lawyer called Zephnal to testify. The Kythera father walked slowly to the witness stand. His gentle eyes looked around the courtroom at all the alien species who had written his people off as worthless. Mr. Zephnal, Jake's lawyer began, please tell the court about your family's experience with other species before the humans found you. Zephnal's voice was soft but clear through the universal translator. We sent distress calls for months. Dozens of ships passed us by, Zelanti vessels, Korath ships, Vex warships, and others. All of them received our signals. All of them chose to ignore us. What reasons did they give? Most gave no reason at all. They simply pretended we didn't exist. One Zelanti captain told us that his people didn't waste time on inferior species. A Korath AI calculated that saving us was not cost-effective. A Vex commander said only the strong deserved to survive. The courtroom was completely silent as Zephnal continued. We were dying slowly, watching our children grow weaker each day. We began to believe that no one in the galaxy cared if we lived or died, that we truly were worthless, as so many told us. What changed? Zephnal looked directly at Jake. Captain, Morrison and his crew changed everything. They didn't just save our lives, they treated us like family. They shared their food, their warmth, their kindness. Dr. Hamilton worked day and night to heal us. Engineer Foster modified their ship to keep us comfortable. The entire crew gave up their own comfort so we could survive. Jake's lawyer nodded. And how do you feel about the charges against Captain Morrison? Zephnal stood up straighter, his voice growing stronger. Captain Morrison is the finest person I have ever met from any species. He risked his career, his ship, and his crew's safety for people he had never met. If that is a crime, then your laws are wrong. The prosecutor tried to object, but Judge Tech-9 was already processing this testimony. Then little Pipka asked to speak. The judge was hesitant to let a child testify, but Jake's lawyer argued that her perspective was important. Pipka walked up to the witness stand, so small she could barely see over it. When she spoke, her young voice carried through the silent courtroom. I want to tell everyone about the humans, she said simply. When we were dying in our broken ship, we thought the universe was a cold, mean place where nobody cared about anyone else. She looked around at all the alien faces watching her. But the humans showed us something different. They showed us that some people still believe in helping others even when it's hard or dangerous. Captain Morrison and his friends saved us, but they also saved something else. What did they save? Jake's lawyer asked gently. They saved the idea that good people still exist. They saved hope. The courtroom remained silent for a long moment after Pipka finished speaking. Then Judge Tech-9 announced its decision. After processing all testimony and evidence, this court finds Captain Morrison not guilty of all charges. His actions, while technically in violation of orders, served a greater good that outweighs military protocol. The judge paused, its mechanical voice taking on an almost emotional tone. Furthermore, this court recommends that the Galactic Council establish new protocols requiring all member species to respond to distress calls from civilian vessels. These shall be known as the Morrison Protocols. Jake felt relief wash over him as his crew cheered from the gallery. But the real victory came when other species in the courtroom began standing up, applauding not just the verdict, but the principle it represented. 6 months later, Jake stood on the observation deck of the USS Horizon, now assigned to the new Galactic Rescue Corps. Through the window, he could see the colony world where the Kythera family had chosen to settle. It had become a center of art and culture that attracted visitors from across the galaxy. Dr. Hamilton joined him at the window. Hard to believe how much has changed. Jake nodded. The Morrison protocols have already saved dozens of ships. Other species are starting to see the value in helping instead of ignoring. And the Kythera? Jake smiled as he watched Pipka playing. In the colony's central garden with children from several different species. They're teaching the galaxy that strength isn't just about weapons and technology. Sometimes the strongest thing you can do is show kindness to someone who needs help. Amy Foster's voice came through the communicator. Captain, we're receiving a distress call from the Outer Rim. Looks like a group of civilian ships caught in an ion storm. Jake straightened his uniform. Set course for their location. Maximum speed. Sir, it'll take us 3 days to reach them and we'll miss our scheduled rendezvous with the fleet. Jake smiled. Amy, when someone calls for help, humans answer. That's what we do. As the USS Horizon changed course toward the distant distress call, Jake thought about how much the galaxy had changed. Other species were learning that cooperation and compassion weren't signs of weakness. but sources of strength that made everyone stronger. The Kythera family had been right about one thing. The universe was full of beauty and wonder, if you just knew how to look for it. And sometimes Jake realized the most beautiful thing of all was watching someone choose to help a stranger, simply because it was the right thing to do. In the distance, more ships were changing course to help with the rescue. The galaxy was slowly becoming a place where no one had to face danger alone, where every life mattered regardless of species or status. It was becoming more human, and that was exactly what it needed.